Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine waking before sunrise inside freezing New York City, 1890.
Your mattress is stuffed with rags, while freezing November wind cuts through broken apartment windows.
6 floors below, crowded streets already explode with shouting vendors, horses, arguments, and endless movement.
A furious woman curses loudly in Italian after someone crashes directly into her heavy water bucket.
You are not visiting history. You are standing alive inside brutal New York City during 1890. By 1890, over 1.5 million people are packed tightly onto Manhattan Island's narrow, crowded streets. Extraordinary wealth and devastating poverty exist here, separated sometimes by only a single crowded city block. The skyline remains low, jagged, smoky, and completely different from modern glass-covered Manhattan skyscrapers today. The newly completed Brooklyn Bridge stands proudly, like an impossible miracle, towering above the East River.
27 workers died building this engineering wonder people still describe almost like divine human achievement.
Lower Manhattan sounds unlike modern cities because engines and electric machines still barely exist anywhere.
Instead of engines, thousands of iron horses hammer endlessly across wet stone streets throughout the entire city. More than 100,000 working horses power transportation, deliveries, streetcars, and Manhattan's growing economy daily. Those horses leave millions of pounds of manure rotting directly across New York streets every single day. The horrifying smell becomes the first unforgettable memory recorded by nearly every visitor arriving into Manhattan. Coal smoke pours endlessly from factory chimneys, covering entire neighborhoods beneath thick, poisonous industrial clouds daily. Rotting garbage piles beside gutters, while dirty water slowly crawls through overcrowded Manhattan streets below everyone. Summer heat bakes horse waste into unbearable streets, while winter transforms everything into filthy, frozen slush everywhere. Slaughterhouses operate openly beside residential neighborhoods where ordinary families struggle daily to survive nearby constantly. The polluted East River carries away everything the rapidly growing city no longer wants to keep. Despite the filth and suffering, millions still believe New York offers unimaginable opportunities and hopeful futures ahead. Electricity begins transforming Manhattan as Edison's power grid slowly introduces glowing modern light into downtown neighborhoods. Gas lamps still dominate most streets, while electricity quietly spreads block by block through Manhattan neighborhoods nightly. Now walk eastward, away from wealthy marble buildings and elegant restaurants, glowing softly beneath expensive gas lights tonight.
The Lower East Side reveals where most ordinary New Yorkers actually live, struggle, and survive together daily. Towering tenement buildings rise tightly together without sunlight, fresh air, or proper breathing space between apartments anywhere.
Entire immigrant families often share one tiny room, barely larger than a modern storage closet, inside tenements. Families of 8 sometimes sleep in rotating shifts because there simply is never enough available room. Before sunrise, exhausted fathers leave for dangerous factory labor, while mothers begin endless sewing work immediately afterward. Young children collect fabric scraps from filthy floors, helping parents desperately finish impossible daily production quotas together. Journalist Jacob Rees begins documenting these brutal living conditions using shocking photography that will disturb wealthy Americans. His photographs expose hidden immigrant suffering most comfortable New Yorkers never personally witness inside overcrowded tenement neighborhoods daily.
One photographed family of 11 survives inside a single dark room, lacking direct sunlight for years continuously.
The apartment window faces only another brick wall, preventing sunlight from ever entering their miserable home naturally. Ventilation barely exists inside these overcrowded buildings, where dangerous diseases spread invisibly through entire immigrant communities rapidly. Tuberculosis moves silently through crowded apartments like an invisible predator, slowly destroying exhausted immigrant families from within. Some Lower East Side blocks experience death rates resembling cities trapped under military siege during brutal wartime conditions. During summer, unbearable heat traps itself inside apartments until walls sweat moisture from overwhelming, overcrowded temperatures constantly. Families escape suffocating apartments by sleeping outside on rooftops and dangerous fire escapes during brutal summer nights. Every week, landlords arrive demanding rent immediately, while desperate families fear instant eviction from overcrowded tenement apartments constantly. Missing rent even once means your belongings could be thrown directly onto filthy streets before sunset arrives. Many landlords personally collect payments accompanied by intimidating enforcers standing silently behind them during confrontational rent visits regularly. Yet inside these impossible apartments, immigrant families still create warmth, love, culture, and hopeful memories together. Somehow, boiling cabbage and fresh rye bread fill crowded rooms with comforting smells, despite surrounding poverty and suffering. A tired mother quietly sings Yiddish lullabies while rocking her exhausted baby beside dim candlelight every evening. A young immigrant studies English slowly by candlelight, believing New York might eventually reward his determination and sacrifice. He painstakingly learns each unfamiliar English word while surrounded by poverty, exhaustion, noise, and uncertainty every single night. Perhaps his patience will someday succeed, or perhaps New York will consume him before that opportunity ever arrives. Between 1880 and 1900, over 9 million immigrants arrive, searching desperately for survival and better futures in America. For nearly every arriving immigrant, New York becomes the first terrifying doorway into an entirely unfamiliar American life. Many immigrants flee southern Italy, escaping drought, crushing debt, starvation, and hopeless economic collapse back home completely. Others escape violent pogroms and persecution across Eastern Europe, hoping America offers safety, dignity, and human freedom instead. Immigrants also arrive from Ireland, Germany, China, Greece, and countless struggling communities across the rapidly changing world. Before Ellis Island opens, exhausted newcomers enter America through a busy immigration center called Castle Garden beside Manhattan Harbor. Most immigrants arrive carrying one suitcase, one name, and only one English word: work, spoken desperately and repeatedly. Many families sold furniture, borrowed money, and sacrificed everything simply to afford dangerous passage toward New York Harbor. The terrifying ocean crossing lasts several exhausting weeks, deep below ships, inside overcrowded steerage compartments, without proper sanitation. Hundreds of immigrants sleep packed together beneath waterline, with almost no fresh air entering crowded ship compartments. Shared sanitation buckets overflow, while disease spreads quickly among exhausted passengers trapped together below deck for weeks continuously. By arrival, many immigrants have already spent days dangerously ill, while dreaming desperately about surviving life inside America someday. The New York awaiting immigrants is harsh, unforgiving, overcrowded, and far more dangerous than imagined before arrival. Labor contractors immediately wait beside docks, offering suspicious jobs to vulnerable immigrants speaking unfamiliar languages and desperate hopes. The promised jobs sound fair initially, but most immigrants quickly discover exploitation hidden beneath every opportunity offered carefully. Men are sent toward coal yards, tanneries,
factories, and brutal industrial jobs, destroying bodies within exhausting years rapidly.
Most factory laborers work 12 exhausting hours daily, beneath dangerous machines and unforgiving supervisors watching constantly nearby. Women commonly become domestic servants or complete endless sewing piecework inside overcrowded tenement apartments every night afterward.
Some women roll cigars, assemble artificial flowers, or stitch coat linings for painfully low wages every week.
Children, barely 10 years old, legally work exhausting jobs, helping families survive impossible economic pressure and rising weekly rents. Even younger children secretly work hidden jobs where nobody officially counts injuries, suffering, or dangerous labor conditions ever.
Despite unbearable conditions, immigrants still send precious money home while pretending life in America is improving steadily there.
Most letters begin confidently with, "We are well," even when families are actually starving, sick, and overwhelmed completely.
Admitting failure to relatives back home feels more painful than enduring brutal factory labor inside New York itself daily.
Travel north now toward Fifth Avenue, where unimaginable wealth creates an entirely different version of New York City altogether.
The Vanderbilts, Astors, and Carnegies build extravagant lives, believing their enormous success represents destiny and natural superiority entirely.
Fifth Avenue mansions resemble enormous European palaces, with ballrooms, servant quarters, imported food, and endless luxurious decorations everywhere. A single extravagant dinner party here costs more than hard-working factory laborers earn during entire exhausting years combined.
Elite women wear massive gowns requiring entire carriage spaces while maintaining impossible beauty standards through painful corsets constantly.
Their lives revolve around reputation, social appearances, charity events, opera nights, and carefully protected family prestige constantly.
Receiving invitations from Mrs. Astor's famous ballroom becomes a powerful social currency among wealthy New York elites everywhere. Meanwhile, powerful businessmen reshape entire American industries while controlling unimaginable wealth from luxurious Manhattan offices high above society.
J.P. Morgan restructures industries, while Rockefeller dominates nearly all American oil production through ruthless economic control completely.
These wealthy men influence governments directly, while paying almost no federal taxes during America's explosive industrial expansion period.
The astonishing distance separating unimaginable luxury from desperate immigrant poverty measures less than 2 crowded Manhattan miles physically.
For ordinary New Yorkers, survival depends entirely upon exhausting labor performed endlessly beneath dangerous conditions and ruthless economic pressure daily.
Garment factories begin work before sunrise and continue until foremen finally decide exhausted workers may leave. Afterward, eventually. No guaranteed weekends, minimum wages, workplace protections, or compensation exist for injured laborers anywhere during this dangerous era. Machines regularly tear fingers apart, while injured workers receive only rags before returning immediately back to dangerous labor again. Workers can either continue laboring injured or leave permanently without wages, protection, or future employment opportunities remaining available.
The garment industry thrives through a brutal sweating system, exploiting desperate immigrant families across overcrowded Manhattan neighborhoods continuously.
Large department stores subcontract work towards smaller bosses, operating hidden sweatshops directly inside immigrant tenement apartments everywhere, constantly.
These sweatshops remain dark, overcrowded, unventilated, and controlled entirely through fear, exhaustion, and economic desperation every single day. Laborers sit elbow to elbow beside dangerous candles burning frighteningly close toward enormous piles of flammable fabric surrounding everyone constantly. Deadly fires erupt frequently inside these hidden workshops,
trapping terrified workers behind overcrowded rooms and locked, dangerous exits unexpectedly. In 1890, garment workers still lack unions, legal protections, political voices, and realistic opportunities for meaningful workplace change entirely.
On New York streets, organized crime becomes another ruthless economy, controlling vulnerable neighborhoods through fear and violent intimidation regularly.
The notorious 5 Points neighborhood remains among the world's most violent and overcrowded urban districts during this difficult period.
Although slightly safer than previous decades, violent gangs still dominate entire Manhattan blocks, like private governments controlling desperate residents. The Wyos, Hudson Dusters, and Dead Rabbits terrorize neighborhoods through robbery, violence, extortion, and organized street crime continuously.
Protection money is demanded regularly, while organized pickpocket teams target crowded ferry docks and busy immigrant marketplaces relentlessly, daily.
Children barely 8 years old often become gang lookouts, messengers, and street thieves, surviving through dangerous criminal networks. The New York Police Department exists, but corruption spreads deeply throughout nearly every level of urban law enforcement already.
Many police officers receive positions through political connections rather than actual qualifications, training, or public service experience beforehand.
Underpaid officers frequently supplement incomes by accepting regular payments from illegal businesses they supposedly regulate and investigate publicly. Brothels, gambling halls, and illegal saloons operate openly because local police precincts profit directly from protecting them financially.
Corruption within the NYPD during 1890 becomes structural, normalized, and deeply embedded throughout New York's political machinery entirely.
For poor immigrants, daily meals often consist only of cheap soup, bread crusts, or shared fried potatoes together. Pushcart vendors sell hot bean soup for only pennies beside crowded, muddy streets throughout working-class Manhattan neighborhoods every evening. Street food fills New York everywhere, with roasted chestnuts, oysters, cold corn, and cheap working-class meals available constantly. Fresh oysters remain incredibly affordable, because New York harbor waters still support enormous natural oyster populations during this era. Meanwhile, wealthy New Yorkers dine extravagantly inside Delmonico's, America's most famous luxury restaurant during the Gilded Age period. One luxurious dinner here costs more than exhausted garment workers earn after multiple brutal weeks inside dangerous sweatshops completely. Imported champagne, lobster, terrapin stew, and French menus symbolize enormous wealth, separating Manhattan's social classes dramatically and visibly. Fashion during 1890 instantly reveals social class, wealth, occupation, and personal reputation throughout every crowded Manhattan neighborhood visibly. Women's fashion emphasizes tightly structured silhouettes, high collars, heavy fabrics, and painfully restrictive corsets throughout polite society universally. Working-class women adapt affordable clothing carefully, often sewing dresses themselves using leftover fabric scraps purchased cheaply nearby weekly. Men wear hats everywhere, because appearing bareheaded publicly suggests poverty, illness, weakness, or embarrassing social failure immediately instead. Laborers usually wear simple caps, while businessmen prefer polished bowlers, and wealthy elites proudly display expensive top hats publicly. For wealthy New Yorkers, nightlife becomes vibrant entertainment, filled with theaters, opera houses, and glamorous social performances nightly everywhere. Vaudeville theaters attract massive audiences using comedy, music, acrobatics, and bizarre novelty acts for inexpensive public entertainment nightly. Admission costs only a dime,
making vaudeville one affordable escape from exhausting labor and overcrowded immigrant housing conditions, temporarily.
The newly rebuilt Madison Square Garden hosts boxing matches, horse shows, political rallies, and extravagant public spectacles constantly.
Inside crowded boxing arenas, spectators roar wildly while exhausted fighters battle brutally beneath smoky electric lighting overhead tonight. Political rallies attract enormous crowds where ambitious leaders promise reform, opportunity, patriotism, and stronger American futures publicly. Together, the Bowery District offers rougher nightlife filled with louder crowds, dangerous saloons, cheap beer, and unpredictable violence nightly. Concert saloons combined alcohol, entertainment, gambling, and crime inside smoky establishments crowded with restless working-class customers constantly. Nightly. For Manhattan elites, the Metropolitan Opera becomes another stage where social status matters more than performances themselves often. Being seen beside important families inside prestigious opera boxes strengthens reputations throughout New York's powerful upper-class social circles dramatically. By midnight, most crowded Manhattan streets finally quiet beneath smoky skies and fading gaslight reflections across wet stone. Pushcart vendors drag heavy carts back into crowded tenement hallways where merchandise remains stored overnight safely indoors together. Factories become dark and silent temporarily while overheated machinery slowly cools beneath lingering industrial smoke. Across Manhattan overnight, thousands of exhausted horses finally rest inside crowded stables, breathing warm fog into freezing nighttime Manhattan air together quietly. Behind locked mansion curtains, wealthy families sleep comfortably, while immigrant neighborhoods remain crowded, noisy, and painfully restless overnight still. Inside a tiny Hester Street apartment, one exhausted immigrant still remains awake, writing emotional letters home tonight, alone. He describes New York as loud, freezing, overwhelming, filthy, and completely different from every hopeful expectation imagined previously before arriving. The famous rumor claiming Manhattan streets are paved with gold becomes a bitter immigrant joke quickly after arrival. Instead, the streets are paved with rough stone, mud, garbage, smoke, and endless, overwhelming horse manure everywhere, constantly. Yet, despite unimaginable hardship, immigrants still refuse abandoning New York because something extraordinary feels possible here, deeply inside them. The city feels alive, unlike anywhere else, constantly building something enormous, unfinished, chaotic, and undeniably human together every day. Immigrants believe their sacrifices might someday shape America's future, even if they personally never witnessed the rewards themselves. 135 years later, modern New Yorkers still walk streets built through immigrant suffering, determination, and impossible resilience daily. Every bridge, subway tunnel, factory, and neighborhood carries invisible fingerprints from immigrants who sacrificed everything, building New York tirelessly. Their exhausting labor transformed crowded Manhattan into the financial, industrial, and cultural center dominating modern America eventually afterward. Behind every glamorous Gilded Age mansion stood invisible servants, maids, cooks, and laborers, sustaining elite luxury constantly. Every day, the immigrant poor built fortunes for industrial tycoons while surviving inside dangerous, overcrowded apartments lacking basic human dignity entirely. Many workers never escaped poverty, despite spending entire lifetimes contributing toward New York's explosive economic growth and expansion continuously. Others slowly opened businesses, educated children, and gradually climbed beyond the crushing poverty surrounding immigrant neighborhoods during this difficult era. Second-generation immigrant children eventually become teachers, lawyers, shop owners, journalists, and political leaders, shaping modern American society afterward. The Lower East Side remains overcrowded and difficult, Yet vibrant cultures begin permanently transforming New York's identity during these years.
Italian bakeries, Jewish delis, German beer halls, and Chinese laundries reshape Manhattan into a multicultural urban mosaic permanently. Despite harsh realities, immigrants continue arriving daily, believing New York still offers opportunities unavailable anywhere else on Earth previously.
The city's endless noise, smoke, ambition, and struggle become strangely addictive for those determined to survive and succeed eventually.
New York during 1890 remains brutal and unequal, yet undeniably alive with human energy unlike anywhere else globally, simultaneously. The immigrants who built this city rarely receive monuments, statues, or recognition matching their enormous sacrifices and contributions historically. Most died anonymously inside tenements, factories, construction sites, or overcrowded hospitals before experiencing lasting comfort or financial security personally.
Still, their children and grandchildren inherit opportunities unimaginable within the villages and hardships immigrants originally escaped years earlier.
Modern New York stands directly upon foundations built through immigrant exhaustion, courage, ambition, and relentless determination against impossible circumstances. Together, the crowded tenements, filthy streets, and dangerous factories reveal the true hidden price behind America's industrial rise historically.
Remembering these forgotten lives honestly matters because modern prosperity often hides enormous suffering buried beneath historical progress silently. The story of 1890 New York ultimately belongs not only to millionaires, but ordinary survivors enduring impossible circumstances together daily.
Their struggles, hopes, sacrifices, and resilience continue echoing through modern New York streets even 135 years later. Horse-drawn streetcars carry exhausted workers across Manhattan while struggling endlessly through overcrowded, muddy avenues every single day. Commuters squeeze tightly together inside slow streetcars, breathing smoke, sweat, and freezing winter air during long, exhausting rides daily.
Elevated steam trains thunder above Manhattan streets, casting smoke, ash, and deafening noise across crowded neighborhoods continuously below.
The elevated railways transform transportation, yet make nearby apartments unbearably loud, dark, and permanently covered with soot everywhere nearby.
Ferry boats crossing the East River remain essential lifelines connecting Manhattan with rapidly growing Brooklyn neighborhoods and expanding industries.
Longshoremen unload endless cargo shipments, powering New York's booming economy through exhausting, back-breaking waterfront labor every single night.
The waterfront smells strongly of salt water, coal smoke, fish markets, and industrial waste drifting through crowded harbor air constantly.
Newsboys race through crowded streets, shouting dramatic headlines about murders, politics, scandals, and international disasters every single morning loudly.
Cheap newspapers spread rapidly because millions desperately craved information, entertainment, and connection inside rapidly changing modern city life.
Political cartoons and sensational journalism begin shaping public opinion across immigrant neighborhoods and wealthy drawing rooms simultaneously, everywhere.
Winter storms transform Manhattan into freezing chaos, where snow, manure, and mud create dangerous streets, impossible for walking safely. Poor families burn whatever fuel they can afford, while freezing drafts enter tenements through cracked windows and broken walls nightly.
Coal deliveries arrive constantly because nearly every apartment, business, and factory depends completely upon burning fuel for warmth daily. Children play dangerously beside busy streets, using frozen manure piles and dirty snowbanks as winter playgrounds every afternoon.
During summer, unbearable heat combines with disease and overcrowding, creating deadly conditions across Lower East Side neighborhoods repeatedly,
yearly. Public drinking fountains and hydrants become gathering places where exhausted residents briefly escape suffocating Manhattan summer temperatures together outdoors. Doctors struggle fighting epidemics without modern medicine, while overcrowded hospitals overflow with desperately sick immigrant patients continuously during outbreaks. Many immigrants distrust hospitals completely because patients often enter alive yet never return back home afterward, unfortunately. Religious institutions become emotional anchors, providing charity, identity, protection, and community support throughout immigrant Manhattan neighborhoods, constantly together. Catholic churches, Jewish synagogues, and immigrant missions offer food, shelter, language lessons, and emotional comfort freely whenever possible. Sunday mornings temporarily transform noisy immigrant neighborhoods into crowded gatherings filled with worship, family, and fragile moments of peace. Children wear carefully preserved clothes because Sunday appearances strongly influence community respect and family reputation throughout immigrant neighborhoods publicly. Public schools slowly educate immigrant children, while teachers struggle managing overcrowded classrooms filled with countless different languages simultaneously. Daily. Many immigrant parents believe education offers the only realistic escape from poverty, dangerous labor, and exhausting factory life permanently. Night schools attract exhausted adults determined to learn English after surviving brutally long industrial workdays across Manhattan, constantly, every evening. Libraries and reading rooms become rare, quiet spaces where ambitious immigrants dream about transforming their futures through knowledge patiently. Women increasingly organize reform movements demanding cleaner housing, safer workplaces, and protection for vulnerable immigrant children across New York. Settlement houses provide childcare, education, healthcare, and community programs, helping immigrant families survive overwhelming urban poverty together, compassionately. Reformers like Jane Addams inspire growing social movements, challenging dangerous industrial conditions and widespread urban inequality throughout America. Gradually, labor unions begin organizing secretly because factory owners aggressively punish workers demanding safer conditions or higher wages publicly, anywhere. Factory owners frequently blacklist workers involved with unions, destroying future employment opportunities across entire industrial neighborhoods completely afterward. Despite enormous risks, strikes spread gradually as workers grow increasingly desperate beneath worsening industrial exploitation and economic inequality everywhere. Police often violently suppress labor demonstrations, protecting industrial owners rather than struggling workers demanding basic human dignity publicly. Instead, New York newspapers sometimes portray immigrants unfairly as dangerous radicals threatening social order and wealthy American institutions publicly, nationwide. Yet immigrants continue building businesses, raising families, and reshaping Manhattan despite constant discrimination and exhausting economic struggles surrounding them. Chinese immigrants face particularly severe prejudice while operating laundries and restaurants under constant suspicion and restrictive discriminatory laws nationwide. Chinatown grows quietly, despite discrimination, preserving language, traditions, food, and cultural identity within crowded Manhattan streets together carefully. Irish immigrants increasingly dominate city politics through powerful neighborhood networks and influential Democratic Party organizations across Manhattan strategically. Political machines like Tammany Hall exchange jobs and favors for loyal immigrant votes throughout crowded working-class neighborhoods consistently. Everywhere. Corruption flourishes openly, yet many immigrants still depend upon political machines for survival, employment, and emergency assistance during hardship. Street musicians fill crowded neighborhoods with violins, accordions, and folk songs echoing through smoky Manhattan evenings beautifully everywhere. Music becomes emotional comfort, helping immigrants remember distant homelands while adapting painfully toward unfamiliar American urban life gradually. Photographers increasingly capture ordinary New Yorkers,
preserving fleeting moments from rapidly changing immigrant neighborhoods forever, visually, through historical images. Many tenement residents have never owned photographs before arriving in New York and beginning completely unfamiliar urban lives here. Coney Island grows rapidly into a chaotic amusement escape, attracting workers seeking temporary relief from exhausting industrial routines nearby weekends. Roller coasters, sideshows, and electric lights amaze visitors experiencing modern entertainment unlike anything from traditional immigrant homelands previously before. For many immigrants, simply seeing the Atlantic Ocean freely becomes emotional proof they survived impossible journeys toward uncertain futures here. Fire remains one of Manhattan's greatest fears because overcrowded wooden buildings ignite and spread flames terrifyingly fast throughout neighborhoods. Firefighters battle dangerous blazes using primitive equipment, while entire blocks sometimes disappear beneath smoke and collapsing structures overnight, unexpectedly. Insurance rarely protects poor immigrants, meaning devastating fires instantly destroy homes, possessions, and carefully built livelihoods completely forever. Afterward, funerals pass regularly through crowded streets because death remains painfully common across dangerous factories and unhealthy immigrant housing conditions everywhere. Children frequently witness death early because disease, accidents, fires, and industrial injuries surround everyday Manhattan life constantly during this era. Yet life continues relentlessly because surviving New York requires constant movement, labor, and determination despite overwhelming grief surrounding families daily. The city never truly stops because commerce, transportation, labor, and survival continue operating every hour across Manhattan, constantly, day and night. Factories awaken before sunrise, while newspaper presses, docks, bakeries, and markets already operate beneath dark, smoky skies every morning. Fresh bread smells drift through crowded immigrant streets, briefly overpowering smoke, garbage, and horse manure during quiet dawn moments daily. Milk wagons deliver fragile glass bottles before sunrise because refrigeration barely exists across most crowded Manhattan households during 1890. Ice deliveries remain essential because wealthy homes and restaurants depend entirely upon massive harvested winter ice blocks constantly, year-round. Without modern refrigeration, food spoils dangerously fast, causing frequent illness throughout overcrowded, poor immigrant neighborhoods during hot summers especially. Even ordinary survival demands constant physical effort because modern conveniences simply do not exist yet anywhere inside Manhattan completely. Most tenement apartments lack indoor plumbing, forcing residents toward crowded shared toilets located outside individual family rooms completely. Bathing regularly becomes difficult because heating water requires expensive fuel and exhausting physical labor for struggling immigrant families. Constantly. Laundry hangs endlessly across narrow alleys, creating fluttering canopies above crowded Lower East Side streets throughout every season, continuously. Women scrub clothing manually for hours because washing machines remain unavailable inside overcrowded immigrant neighborhoods during this exhausting era. Barbershops and saloons become important social centers where immigrants exchange news, gossip, politics, and survival advice, gather regularly. Saloons often function like unofficial community centers, providing warmth, companionship, and temporary escape from exhausting industrial lives nightly together. Alcohol abuse spreads widely because many workers attempt numbing physical exhaustion, grief, loneliness, and crushing economic anxiety constantly. Nightly. Women's temperance movements grow rapidly, while activists blame alcohol for worsening poverty, violence, and family suffering throughout immigrant communities. Horse manure attracts enormous swarms of flies, spreading disease aggressively across crowded neighborhoods during hot, humid Manhattan summers,
repeatedly, yearly. Public sanitation workers struggled desperately, removing endless waste generated daily by Manhattan's exploding population and horse-driven transportation systems constantly. Dead horses occasionally remain abandoned beside busy streets until overcrowded sanitation crews finally remove massive, decomposing bodies afterward, slowly. Streetlights powered by gas create dramatic nighttime shadows, while fog and smoke transform Manhattan into haunting cinematic darkness beautifully. Pickpockets and thieves prefer crowded nighttime streets, where darkness and confusion help criminals disappear quickly after robberies successfully nearby. Many immigrants fear walking alone after dark because violent crime and corruption remain deeply embedded throughout struggling neighborhoods constantly, everywhere. Despite danger, nightlife thrives because crowded apartments leave workers desperately searching for entertainment and breathing space outside nightly together. Street preachers passionately warn crowds about sin, poverty, greed, and salvation beside noisy immigrant marketplaces daily throughout Manhattan publicly. Political radicals also gather publicly, discussing socialism, anarchism, labor rights, and revolutionary ideas spreading across industrial America rapidly. Authorities increasingly fear labor unrest because industrial inequality continues growing dangerously throughout crowded American cities during this volatile period. Immigrant newspapers published in countless languages help communities preserve culture while understanding rapidly changing American society simultaneously. Every day. Different neighborhoods develop unique identities shaped by language, religion, food, traditions, and shared immigrant survival experiences together permanently. Little Italy overflows with crowded families, fresh bread smells, loud conversations, and children racing through narrow alleyways constantly together. Jewish neighborhoods pulse with bookstores, synagogues, markets, and tailors working endlessly inside crowded garment district apartments nightly everywhere. German beer halls attract crowded evening gatherings where immigrants sing traditional songs while escaping difficult factory routines temporarily together nightly. Chinatown remains compact yet vibrant, preserving ancient traditions despite constant discrimination surrounding Chinese immigrant communities throughout Manhattan persistently. New York's crowded harbor welcomes luxury ocean liners beside filthy immigrant steamships, carrying completely different worlds simultaneously into Manhattan daily. Wealthy travelers arrive carrying trunks filled with luxury, while immigrants arrive carrying survival hopes and painful uncertainty only instead. Wall Street rapidly expands because industrial capitalism transforms New York into America's growing financial powerhouse during this aggressive economic era. Stockbrokers and financiers gamble fortunes daily, while ordinary workers struggle surviving week to week inside overcrowded immigrant tenements nearby simultaneously. Always. Telegraph wires spread rapidly across Manhattan, allowing information, stock prices, and breaking news traveling faster than ever previously imaginable. Technology begins shrinking distances dramatically, yet human labor still powers nearly every essential system sustaining New York daily during 1890. Children selling flowers, newspapers, and matches crowd dangerous intersections because desperate families need every possible penny immediately for survival. Many homeless children sleep inside alleys, stairwells, or abandoned carts after losing parents through disease and industrial poverty completely. Charity organizations struggle helping thousands of orphan children wandering Manhattan streets, searching constantly for food and temporary shelter nightly. Some children eventually escape poverty, while countless others disappear anonymously into dangerous labor and lifelong urban hardship permanently afterward. Christmas and religious holidays briefly transform crowded neighborhoods with candles, music, food, and precious moments of shared happiness together. Snow-covered Manhattan appears almost magical during holidays,
Despite underlying poverty, overcrowding, and exhausting industrial hardship surrounding families constantly still.
Street photographers capture holiday portraits because families treasure rare opportunities, preserving memories inside rapidly changing immigrant lives forever, visually.
By decade's end, Manhattan grows even more crowded as immigration and industrial expansion continue accelerating rapidly across every neighborhood simultaneously. Old neighborhoods constantly evolve because New York endlessly destroys, rebuilds, expands, and reinvents itself through unstoppable human ambition. Repeatedly, the city's restless energy attracts dreamers, opportunists, criminals, reformers, laborers, and survivors from every corner of the world continuously. New York rewards ambition brutally because success often demands sacrifice, endurance, luck, and relentless labor beyond ordinary human limits constantly. For every millionaire mansion, thousands of struggling workers sacrifice health and youth, sustaining Manhattan's explosive industrial wealth invisibly, daily. Immigrant mothers quietly carry enormous emotional burdens while holding fragile families together inside overcrowded, difficult tenement lives every single day. Fathers often age rapidly because dangerous labor, stress, and malnutrition slowly destroy bodies long before old age naturally arrives.
Children mature unusually fast because survival inside Manhattan requires contributing labor, responsibility, and resilience from extremely young ages immediately.
Despite unimaginable hardship, moments of love, laughter, friendship, and celebration still flourish across crowded immigrant neighborhoods, constantly together. Street weddings and neighborhood celebrations briefly transform filthy alleys into joyful communal spaces, overflowing with music and dancing nightly. New York's energy comes directly from millions of ordinary people refusing surrender despite overwhelming obstacles surrounding their difficult lives constantly. Everywhere. Every crowded dock, factory, bridge, and tenement reveals humanity struggling painfully toward modern industrial civilization together, simultaneously during this era. The city appears chaotic and brutal, yet millions continue believing tomorrow might finally improve their difficult circumstances. Somehow, eventually, some dreams succeed spectacularly, while countless others disappear silently beneath Manhattan's endless industrial machine, without recognition or remembrance afterward. Still, the city keeps absorbing newcomers because New York represents possibility more powerfully than almost anywhere else globally during 1890. The Lower East Side alone contains countless untold stories of sacrifice, ambition, heartbreak, and survival, hidden behind narrow apartment windows. Behind every window, someone struggles toward a future they may never personally live long enough to witness themselves completely. Factories, bridges, railroads, and skyscrapers eventually rise because immigrant generations sacrifice comfort, building America's industrial future tirelessly, together, continuously. Modern New York eventually inherits wealth, power, culture, and influence, created largely through forgotten immigrant labor and suffering historically. Remembering these ordinary lives honestly matters because history often celebrates wealth while ignoring human suffering beneath economic progress completely. The truth about 1890 New York includes both extraordinary opportunity and devastating inequality, existing side by side constantly throughout Manhattan, simultaneously, always. This city becomes legendary, not because life here feels easy, but because survival itself demands extraordinary resilience and courage daily. 135 years later, modern Manhattan still carries echoes from those crowded, horse-filled streets. Beneath every skyscraper,
silently. The immigrants who crossed dangerous oceans rarely imagined their descendants would someday shape modern American politics, culture, and business permanently. The immigrants who crossed dangerous oceans rarely imagined their descendants would someday shape modern American politics, culture, and business permanently. The crowded tenements and filthy streets reveal uncomfortable truths often hidden beneath romanticized stories about America's industrial rise historically.
Progress during the Gilded Age depends heavily upon invisible workers, sacrificing health, safety, childhoods, and entire futures daily, together, continuously.
Yet these same immigrants continue building communities filled with resilience, traditions, faith, ambition, and unforgettable human determination, despite everything.
New York in 1890 remains unfinished, chaotic, overcrowded, ambitious, dangerous, and astonishingly alive beyond anything modern visitors might imagine.
Somewhere tonight, another immigrant still writes home, describing Manhattan's noise, cold streets, and impossible, overwhelming energy, honestly, by candlelight.
He knows the streets are not paved with gold, only stone, mud, smoke, and endless horse manure everywhere. But despite everything, he still refuses leaving, because New York somehow makes impossible dreams feel painfully achievable here constantly. 135 years later, we still walk the city those exhausted immigrants painfully built together through sacrifice and resilience.